Now, with the communication that was sent to you, forwarded from my communication to the mayor, forwarded to you guys with this ordinance attached, we also looked at and discussed at the group or the committee meeting some other things that have come up with respect to zoning, which would be amending the zoning ordinance for limiting home occupations and limiting what caregivers can do separate from the commercial facilities, and potentially allowing caregivers in the I-1 light industrial district to try and take it out of the neighborhoods if somebody wanted to be a medical marijuana caregiver. That's not up for your consideration, because any changes to the zoning code would have to go through the process as it goes through the planning commission first with a public hearing, and then there's an approval or recommendation. But I just wanted to bring that up to you guys in context as, you know, some tools that are available out there. The reason why those were brought up is that until last summer, or this past summer, medical marijuana regulations, whether it was zoning or licensing, trying to limit it in the neighborhoods and limit it to certain places, or limits on zoning or how many plants, was getting struck down by every court. Different municipalities tried different things, and it was getting struck down after struck down after struck down. And then what happened is the city, one of the cities, Bryant Township, I believe, passed an ordinance that said that if you want to be a medical marijuana caregiver, that's fine, you could do that. You could do that at your house, but you can't do it in a commercial building, and it has to be related to a home occupation. To try and avoid what people were doing is, in the absence of regulations, they were just buying a house and then just filling it up with 72 plants because it's in residential, and as long as you're a caregiver and have, you know, a patient or patients and yourself, you could grow as many plants as you want. There's nothing the municipality or the police can do. And also going into commercial facilities. So it's not up for your consideration, but it's kind of the big picture here. And the changes that I made to the home occupation part of the zoning ordinance mirror exactly what was approved by the Supreme Court as legal, because everything else was struck down as illegal. State Supreme Court, correct.
So they're basically, are they saying that you have to live in that house in order to grow it?
That's what one of the regulations, that would be, again, it's a separate thing, but so the Supreme Court, Bryant Township came up with a zoning ordinance to limit medical marijuana caregivers in the neighborhoods, and basically said, if you're gonna be a medical marijuana caregiver, you can't be in a commercial building, and it has to be just like a regular home occupation, like if you were doing a nail salon or some of the things that you might be able to do, out of your house, which means that it has to primarily be a residence, and then the home occupation is secondary to that.
You can't rent a house or buy a house just to grow marijuana.
Right, exactly, which is what's happening in some neighborhoods. I'm not aware of it specifically, there being like a house like that in Taylor, but I'm aware of it in Detroit and other places where it's an unoccupied house with like 72 plants being grown in it. So that would be it. But the only, I put that in the big picture of kind of what was being talked about. What you're being asked to look at and consider tomorrow night is the ordinance that we were here with, again, several weeks ago, which is basically adopting recreational marijuana in addition to medical with respect to commercial facilities in the city.
Mr. Chairman, can I get a clarification? Because the backup that I have on today's agenda is a draft that's dated 9/15.
Mm-hmm.
You had previously sent us a mocked up draft of 2/15. Are we going back to the 9/15, or is the backup supposed to be 2/15? What is the current version that is being recommended to be approved tomorrow?
The one that I have in front of me is 9/15, and I thought that I printed it out from the email that the mayor forwarded to you guys. I thought.
Well, what was the 2/15 draft?
No, the 2/15. That's what I'm saying. That's the draft, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mine says 9/15.
Yeah, ours is all 9/15. Yeah, so the part where you were saying you left the number blank is not what we have on here.
Mr. Chairman, I think, I suspect what happened was because this was tabled or postponed from another meeting, the identical item was likely loaded on the agenda. I don't know who loaded that item on the agenda, But what we're asking you to consider is the amended version that was circulated with the language that Mr. Greco mentioned with the 2/15/21 draft stamped on it.
So we all have that one, it's just not what's in your packet, this is.
We can make sure, I'll
via
re-forward
email.
it while I'm sitting here, Mr. Chairman, so everybody has the same thing. And in addition to, and I think I CC'd Dave on the email, we also sent over the proposed scoring system. I know that Councilman Bezura had asked to see a copy of that. Again, that's not necessarily part of the ordinance, but that is tentatively what we're proposing to move forward with, and that is very similar to other communities. And in addition to, I know that there's been some discussion about the revenue that these will generate. The state has released revenue sharing numbers, preliminary numbers for you guys. I forwarded that link also. I don't know that I'm still standing here in front of you making that argument that that's necessarily the best reason for this, although it wouldn't hurt to have the additional revenue at this time, but it gives you a number of what the first year provided to each community, so.
Can I ask a question to Mr. Greco about that? Do you know if the number, you know, each community that had a retail store got 28 grand? I've seen and heard speculation that the state did not withhold the $20 million that the statute requires to go toward testing or educational programs. Is that true that they didn't withhold the 20, and is that because the statute changed? Or what can you tell us about that 20 million that was supposed to be withheld the first 2 years revenue was paid out?
That I don't specifically know, but that 20 million was a number that was out there for the last couple of years that communities were wondering, where's the money that's supposed to be coming? And that seemed like an awful lot of money for the state to be keeping to do whatever they wanted to do regarding surveys, enforcement, or all those things. So this money that was sent out about 2 weeks ago kind of just came out of thin air. I mean, I've talked to lawyers that represent a lot of dispensaries regarding other communities and stuff, and they had no idea it was dropping. It was literally a Monday where, certain communities just got a check for, $112,000, some $400,000, some $28,000, some $50,000. So specifically what the state was doing with that original set aside, because what it was is there was a tax that was being excised on the dispensaries. And what the city was saying, or what the state was saying, is that we're putting all this money into a fund, and then we're going to distribute it to all the communities that have dispensaries. It only counts for dispensaries, by the way.
Technically, after they were to take their share
Exactly.
of the $1 million.
So what specifically happened with that, we don't know. We kept getting word, and I've talked to lawyers from big law firms that represent some big, like Colorado, California. They really didn't know where it was going, what was going on with that. And as of literally the week before, I was asked to look into it by someone, and I talked to somebody who had their lobbyists in Lansing trying to figure out what's going on. Then all of a sudden Monday, the money came. So specifically, I don't know, Councilman Bezura.
The only reason I was asking is that, the 28 grand was impressive to me. It was probably more than I was expecting. Not that anybody was throwing numbers around. We were all admitting we don't know, but if we're trying to say, okay, if we opt in and we have, whether we have 3 or 5 or 10 stores times 28 grand, is that a realistic projection for us to use? If this money got put out without dragging 20 million, then it's not a realistic number. So I'm just trying to get a feel for, no guarantees, but is 28 grand going to be the payouts for the 2021 fiscal year, or is it going to be more like zero because next year they're going to have to drag 20 million for the next 2 years? I don't know how to respond to that.
I can't, the answer is I don't know, but I would be surprised. I haven't heard anything that they've still got that 20 grand, because the law specifically provided is that the 20 grand, or 20 million rather, is first before
It's pretty clear in the statute.
It's very
yeah.
clear. So I don't think that that's something that's like sitting in the bank right now, or sitting in the background for them to cash in on, the state. I don't believe that. Now, I would
reports-
only be speculating if I
Yeah, I
suggested that
hear you.
sales would be up even more next year.
Well, it would.
You know, I don't,
I think it would be a legitimate argument to say with more communities opting in and more stores, you'd be generating more tax. So there'd be a bigger pie, but then there'd be more communities opting in, so it'd be split more ways. So
Right.
in my mind, a big piece of that calculation was the 20 million, and the reporting that comes out seems to say we had this much money and the state kept, I think it was 8 or 12 million for their costs. And then counties, municipalities, Michigan Transportation and schools,
Right.
they don't seem to account for the 20, which would lead one to believe they didn't take the 20, but it's in the statute, so they have to take it next year. I don't know what happened to the 20 million.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It was, again, it was kind of a surprise, no doubt.
Okay.
Even with, I was talking with a lawyer who's working with a lobbyist, who's working with a state senator in an area that are pushing some, you know, they were pushing more grow type places, not something that would be subject to this, but they were surprised when the money just kind of came out.
Yeah.
So it was for some communities, getting a check for $112,000, you know, some of them in there $400,000, $600,000, but those are communities like Ann Arbor's ordinance basically provides no limits on the number of facilities. It only provides that, you know, if it's zoned properly, like the limit would be the zoning, right? Is that it's either available or it's not, based upon all the things that that are available. Now Detroit provides a limit on the number of dispensaries, but does not provide a limit on the number of other facilities like grower provisioning center. Their thinking, I think, there is, having had some experience in some other communities with this, is that a lot of people are concerned with, you know, what the visual of a downtown looks like, or, you know, how many green signs are you going to have, or how many green painted buildings with a leaf or a Red Cross sign that's green. Are you going to have in your community? But that if somebody's coming in with a business proposal and it's for a business that isn't going to have a green sign, is not going to be on the main boulevard, is going to be filling up an industrial space. You know, I think their thinking was, what are we going to do? Say no? I mean, if this building's been empty for 40 years and somebody's going to come in, are we really going to, you know, or do we want to keep amending the ordinance to change it, to add things? You know what I mean? And so it looks like some communities are going that route, limit the